John Donne's Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God is one of his most powerful and intense holy sonnets, reflecting his deep struggle with faith, sin, and divine grace. This poem, structured as a Petrarchan sonnet, conveys a plea for spiritual renewal and transformation. The speaker implores God to forcefully intervene in his life, as he feels trapped in sin and unable to achieve salvation through his own efforts. The sonnet is a striking example of Donne's metaphysical poetry, characterized by paradox, violent imagery, and an intense personal struggle with divine authority. The poem follows the structure of a Petrarchan sonnet, with an octave, the first 8 lines, presenting the speaker's problem, and a sestet, the final 6 lines, offering a resolution or plea for change. Donne uses aggressive and forceful language to describe his relationship with God, portraying himself as a sinner in need of divine intervention. Octave, lines 1 to 8. The plea for forceful intervention. The speaker begins by addressing God in the form of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, asking for a powerful and transformative action. Batter my heart, three-personed God, for you. He wants God to break, blow, burn, and remake him, suggesting that his current faith is weak and requires divine destruction and reconstruction. The use of violent verbs emphasizes his desperation and the extent to which he feels his soul needs a radical transformation. The speaker then describes his state of spiritual failure, comparing himself to a town overrun by an enemy. The enemy in this metaphor represents sin, temptation, or even the devil, and the speaker feels as though he has been captured and needs divine intervention to reclaim his soul. Sestet, lines 9 to 14. The paradox of freedom and enslavement. In the sestet, Donne introduces a striking paradox. He argues that to be truly free, he must be imprisoned by God. He compares his relationship with God to that of a woman betrothed to another man, sin, despite loving God. The speaker pleads for God to overpower him completely, even to the extent of ravishing him, a metaphor that suggests an almost violent spiritual takeover. This imagery highlights the intensity of his devotion and his need for divine possession to break free from sin. Analysis of Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God. 1. The use of violent imagery. One of the most striking aspects of this poem is Donne's use of violent and forceful imagery. He does not ask for gentle guidance or persuasion but instead pleads for God to destroy and remake him. Batter my heart suggests a blacksmith's hammer striking metal, indicating that the speaker sees himself as something that must be forcefully reshaped. Break, blow, burn, and make me new conveys a series of increasingly intense actions, illustrating the speaker's desperate need for renewal. Divorce me, untie, or break that knot again suggests that he is bound to sin and must be forcibly separated from it. This aggressive language reflects the speaker's deep frustration with his own spiritual weakness and his longing for divine intervention. 2. The paradox of divine love and force. Donne frequently employs paradox in his metaphysical poetry, and this sonnet is no exception. The central paradox of the poem is that the speaker feels he must be overpowered and imprisoned by God in order to be free. He must be imprisoned in order to be free. He must be ravished in order to be chaste. This tension between divine love and divine force reflects the struggle between free will and grace in Christian theology. The speaker acknowledges that he is too weak to save himself and requires God's forceful intervention to break his bondage to sin. 3. The influence of Christian doctrine. This poem reflects the Christian doctrine of grace and salvation. Donne, who converted to Anglicanism after being raised Catholic, was deeply aware of theological debates about free will and predestination. The poem suggests that human effort alone is insufficient for salvation. Instead, divine grace must intervene. The idea that one must be forcibly taken by God aligns with the belief that true faith requires total surrender. 4. The structure and form of the sonnet. The poem follows the traditional Petrarchan sonnet form, with an octave presenting the problem and a sestet offering a resolution. However, Donne's use of enjambment and irregular rhythms gives the poem a sense of urgency and desperation. The rhyming couplet at the end, "Nor ever chaste, except you ravish me," delivers a final paradox that encapsulates the speaker's plea. 5. Comparison with other Donne poems. This poem can be compared to Donne's other religious sonnets, such as Death Be Not Proud, which also grapples with spiritual transformation and divine power. However, while Death Be Not Proud focuses on the triumph over death, Batter My Heart is more personal and intimate, expressing an individual's desperate plea for salvation. Conclusion. Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God is a deeply passionate and intense plea for divine intervention. Donne's use of violent imagery, paradox, and theological insight creates a powerful meditation on sin, grace, and redemption. The poem's structure reinforces its emotional intensity, with the speaker moving from frustration to a final submission to God's overwhelming power. Ultimately, Donne presents a compelling vision of faith as both a struggle and a surrender, where divine force is necessary for true spiritual transformation. This sonnet remains one of the most striking expressions of religious devotion in English poetry, demonstrating Donne's ability to merge intellectual depth with raw emotional power.